Welcome back to Trillium Talk and our continuing coverage of the 2025 Ontario provincial election. We've reached out to all party leaders for a chance to come on, talk about their party's platform and what they would do should they win the election and become Premier of Ontario. From housing to healthcare and tariffs, we cover it all. Today, it's a special edition of Trillium Talk powered by the Inside the Village podcast. Michael Friscolanti and I sit down for a conversation with the leader of the Ontario Green Party, Mike Schreiner. Back on Inside the Village across the Village Media Network with Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Joining us on the program today, the leader of the Ontario Green Party. It's been a few years, Mike Schreiner. Mike, welcome back to the show. As always, good to see you.
Yes, Scott, it's always a pleasure to be on with you and happy to be back on this snowy winter day.
Yeah, no kidding. That seems to be what we say every day or have for the last several months. All right, let's jump right in here. Mike, first elected Green Party leader back in 2009. Then it took you another 9 years until 2018 to win at least one more seat in the legislature. As you campaign today in the snow, you've now been the party leader for 15 years. What keeps you going?
You know what? I have two daughters, and I want them to have an affordable, livable future. And I think the issues the Ontario Green Party is bringing to the table, especially around generational fairness for housing, addressing the climate and environmental crisis that we're facing, and just ensuring that people have an affordable future, keeps me going. And so I'm excited. We're the only party that's doubled our caucus since the last election and looking to continuing to have it grow in this election.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question. You went from 1 to 2. So realistically, what's the best case scenario for the Greens this election?
You know, we're very confident re-electing myself in Guelph and Ashland, Clancy, and Kitchener Centre. And we're pretty excited about a number of campaigns we're running in rural ridings like Parry Sound, Muskoka, where Matt Richter almost got first last time. We want to get him across the finish line this time. I look at ridings like Bruce Grey Owen Sound, Joe Lougheed, local councillor running, Bronwyn Wilton and Wellington Halton Hills, another local councillor running for us. Those are seats that there is no incumbent and that we've done historically well in. And our message that Doug Ford has abandoned and is ignoring rural Ontario is resonating with people. When I say that, you know, we have a government right now that's wasting $2.2 billion subsidizing a foreign-owned mega spa in downtown Toronto, millions of dollars in Toronto ripping up bike lanes, tens of billions of dollars on this ridiculous idea of a tunnel under Highway 401, $10 to $12 billion building Highway 413 when there's a perfectly good highway right next to it. Meanwhile, in rural communities, people are struggling to keep roads and bridges open. 2.5 million people without a doctor. Rural hospitals are closing their emergency services at unprecedented rates. People struggling to afford a home. Our education system, a $1,500 per student cut, leading to large class sizes in communities across Ontario, but especially in rural communities. People are saying, why is this premier wasting so much money in Toronto on things that people in Toronto don't want when we're struggling in our communities?
You mentioned, I think you answered my next question to a certain extent, Mike, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because part of the feelings out there, I think there are some voters for sure who maybe voted for Doug Ford last time and are thinking, you know what, I'm not going to go with Doug again. I'm going to put my vote somewhere else. But they're looking at you guys, your fourth place party. What do you say to those people who aren't sure they want to give you their vote because they're concerned about that? That I guess determines that it's a waste of a vote.
Well, you know what? I think in ridings like Parry Sound, Muskoka, Bruce Grey Owen Sound, Wellington Halton Hills, Dufferin Caledon, obviously Kitchener and Guelph, the green vote is your vote. If you want to send a message to Queen's Park that we need a government that's not going to abandon rural communities, we need a government that's not going to waste money on things in Toronto that people in Toronto don't even want, then Green's your option. And so we're pretty excited about the strong campaigns we're running in a number of ridings across the province, but especially in some of these rural ridings where Greens have historically done very well.
Mike, the environment and climate change are issues that don't poll very well. How do you get people excited about the Green Party when the environment, of course, your key issue, is not at the top of mind for a lot of Ontarians?
Well, I think the issue that when I knock on doors, people tell me is their number one issue is addressing the housing affordability crisis. And the Ontario Green Party has the best plan. I can't tell you how many housing experts say, you have the best plan to address the housing crisis. Our first-time homebuyers plan to ensure generational fairness, removing fees and taxes on homes built within existing urban boundaries, save people up to $150,000, and do it in a way that we don't have to pave over our farmlands and our wetlands. I think our plans on healthcare, especially preventing illness and supporting funding for rural hospitals, our commitment to reversing the cuts, $1,500 per student in our education sector. And I think one that's really resonating with people is the need to protect Ontario's farmland from Doug Ford, which is exactly why we brought in our plan to permanently protect prime farmland with a food belt. If there was ever a time, especially with these Trump tariffs, that we want to protect Ontario's food security and our $50 billion food and farming economy and the 875,000 jobs it creates, now is the time for that. And the Ontario Greens have been leading the charge to protect our farmland, protect our greenbelt from Doug Ford.
Can you speak more about that, Mike? What's the plan in terms of protect? We hear that a lot from farmers about how we're losing a lot of farmland. What's actually the plan that you would implement?
Yeah, it would basically be permanent protections on prime farmland in Ontario. And that would help drive speculation out of farmland, which is making it difficult for succession planning for farmers and for a new generation of young farmers to be profitable. And our Grow Ontario plan also talks about the importance of ensuring the profitability of family farms. So if you're going to protect that farmland, you got to make sure the people who are farming it can make a living as well. And so that's why we, significant commitments to investing in ag innovation to help farmers reduce costs, increase yields, and protect the environment at the same time. Expanding business risk management programs at a time when there's volatility in global markets, investing in local supply chains and Ontario processing of local foods. Those are all important things about how do we maintain the sustainability of family farms while we're protecting that prime farmland in Ontario.
Mike, I want to go back to the housing plan you talked about. Because I think Scott and I both have kids, and I think it's very fair to say that it's going to be a lot harder for them to get into the housing market than it was for us old folks. We had to scrimp and save, but it was doable. So what's one or two things that the Green Party would actually have for someone who's in their 20s right now to actually get in the market?
Yeah, our first-time homebuyers plan that would remove fees and taxes on starter homes, so homes under 2,000 square feet, built within existing urban boundaries, where we already have the infrastructure in place, so that's where we can quickly increase housing supply. That would save first-time homebuyers up to $150,000. I mean, that's what my first house cost.
Yeah.
So, so we still have a long ways to go, but boy, that's a start.
Yeah. So that's no land transfer tax, is that what you're saying?
That would be removing the land transfer tax and development charges. And then we would replace the development charges for municipalities with an Affordable Communities Fund, a $20 billion commitment over 4 years. So that way you don't see these big property tax increases that municipalities are facing because of the Ford government's downloads. That would enable municipalities to, enable us to upload shelter and housing costs, be able to invest in the infrastructure we need to unlock housing affordability. I mean, I think the biggest challenge, and one of the reasons Ontario is the lowest in housing starts in the country, while most other provinces are seeing an increase in housing starts, is Doug Ford's plans have been, how do we unlock profits for wealthy land speculators? Our plan is, how do we unlock affordable homes that young people can purchase within existing neighborhoods where we already have the infrastructure in place, and also so they don't have these long, expensive commutes, which, by the way, would be good for the climate too.
Mike, I know you've got a couple of kids. Are they concerned about home ownership? What do they say to Dad?
Oh yeah, my 25-year-old daughter is, Dad, I'll never be able to own a home. She's like, a down payment on a home in Ontario now is more than, your first home.
Yeah.
And so, having this first-time homebuyers plan, I think is so important. Our plan to legalize fourplexes and four-story is really important. And one of the things around fourplexes that I think is an exciting proposal we put forward is called strat ownership, where each person or family could own of a fourplex, could own their own unit there. and then be able to transfer that title. BC does this. And so that way we start looking at starter homes again. I think one of the problems we have in Ontario is under the previous government and the current government, everything was taller sprawl. And most of that sprawl is homes that young people simply can't afford. They're just big. We don't build starter homes anymore. And, it's pretty hard to raise a family in a 500 square foot box in the sky. And so one of the reasons we're saying, like, let's legalize more types of housing, provide more choices for people, and remove the taxes and fees so it incentivizes building and also lowers the purchase price for young folks. It's going to be those kinds of bold actions is what it's going to take to unlock affordability for, my children's generation.
Mike, let's shift to healthcare and the doctor shortage, such a huge, monumental issue. How do you begin to tackle it?
Well, first of all, we have to make sure Ontario is no longer last in per capita funding for healthcare. So our plan, hire 3,500 doctors and nurse practitioners and have them operate within team-based care and remove the administrative burden that's preventing so many people from going into family medicine in the first place. So we ensure that everyone has access to a doctor. I know all four parties have said, hey, we have a plan to ensure everyone has access to a doctor. I don't see how the premier is going to be able to implement this plan because it's just so underfunded compared to what the doctors say we need. And I can't tell, I was just meeting with McMaster family medicine students who are at their Kitchener campus. And when I asked how many of them were actually going to go into family medicine, only about 20% of the people raised their hands. And I asked why. And they said, you know what? The paperwork burden on primary care physicians is so high and we don't get paid for that. So why would we even go there? So, there was a motion to say, hey, let's remove this paperwork burden on doctors. And the Ford government voted against that. Like, I don't even understand why they would vote against that. There are a number of things like e-prescribing and centralized referrals, team-based care that would help alleviate that paperwork burden so more doctors will actually go into family medicine. We need to ensure that nurse practitioners are operating at their full scope of practice and that we provide billing codes for nurse practitioner clinics and that we have team-based care because we know that most family physicians and nurses and other healthcare providers want to be a part of these integrated teams, which provide better care for people at a lower cost.
Appreciate that, Mike. Let's shift gears to the United States, and I think you're the best guy to speak to. You're a dual citizen, right? You're if we remember right, last time we spoke, you grew up on a family farm in Kansas right before you moved to Ontario. Right. That's right.
That's right.
What the hell's going on down there? I don't want to try to answer that question, but yeah, obviously there's a lot of concern around the province, around the country. You've seen it as you're door knocking. People are scared of the economic impact these tariffs are going to have. There's the president of the United States seems to be changing his mind by the day on how things are going to go. How do you even begin to come up with a plan to counter that?
Yeah, well, first of all, you don't call an election at a time when our country is our best friends of the South declare economic war on us. I think we should be working across party lines, jurisdictional and sectoral lines to show strength through unity, not have this partisan election, which if we're going to be honest, Doug Ford's been trying to figure out how to call an early election to get out ahead of the investigation into the $8.3 billion Greenbelt scandal. And, I think it's dangerous for him and selfish, frankly, to play politics with tariffs at a time when we should be united. Obviously, there are a number of things we should be doing, investment tax credits to unlock business investments that's frozen just with the threat of tariffs, because that's critical to job creation. Diversifying our trade partners, ending interprovincial trade barriers, protecting our farmland from Doug Ford attack on it so we can protect our food security, food sovereignty, as well as $50 billion food and farming economy. I tell you what, I'm talking to more people from the States now, especially people in manufacturing and especially farmers who are saying, you know what, we're pretty pissed off right now too. We voted for this guy and his tariffs are going to do significant damage for us. So I think we need to be working with allies in the U.S. who are people who voted for Trump to put pressure on him to say, you know what, you're hurting people in the United States as well as Canadians. And I think it's going to take that kind of internal pushback from his own base to get him to backtrack on the destructive path he's on.
Mike, the Americans that you are talking to, I'm just curious, what's their perspective on this whole 51st state BS?
Yeah, I tell them we're not for sale. This is off the table. Most of the folks I've talked to are farmers who, a lot of people I grew up with, coming up from farm country, and they're very nervous. They see these tariffs having a devastating impact on and just creating more instability in global food markets. So they're pretty pissed off because a lot of them voted for this guy. You know what? I think most Americans know that, we're good friends. We're good friends, but we're two sovereign countries. And I can tell you, as somebody who's, grew up in one country and lived most of my life now in Canada, I'd much prefer to live in Canada, and I don't want to become part of the U.S.
Let's hope the friendliness will prevail in the end, and we can figure that out. I want to ask this as well, Mike. Obviously, you're an effective opposition politician. You've been doing this a long time. As a leader of a party with 2 seats, that's your critical role in the legislature, is making sure you're holding the government to account. I'm wondering, how often do you get to actually pull Doug Ford aside or one of his cabinet ministers and do that kind of work? Because in your role, even no matter how well your party does in the next election, that's going to be your role, is to keep holding the government to account. What do you? How good? I mean, how often does that happen? You get to have those kind of conversations, and kind of what do you do to make sure that you're most effective?
I have those conversations every day, and that's one of the reasons I've been able to balance my role of holding government accountable while at the same time delivering things for people in my riding. The most recent example of that is the significant both capital and operational healthcare funding we received for permanent supportive housing in Guelph to help move people out of encampments into homes with wraparound mental health addictions and other supports. I even sometimes have conservative members come up to me and say, "How did you get all that done for Guelph?" And I'm like, well, first of all, the community of Guelph came together and put forward such a compelling proposal that it was hard for government to say no to that. But I think a lot of it comes from, and this is what I think separates Greens from every party, is our MPPs. I'm not their boss. I'm not Ashland Clancy's boss in Kitchener. I tell folks in Parry Sound, Muskoka, I'm not Matt Richter's boss. You, the residents of the riding, the people who vote, you're his boss. And I think we need more local champions in politics today who are going to be the members of their riding's advocate at Queen's Park, not the premier's voice in the riding, not their party leader's voice in the riding. That's the kind of new way of doing politics that Ontario Greens are really pushing hard on, because I think too much political power has been centralized in the Prime Minister's office, the Premier's office, the leader's office. And I think we need those local champions who are going to be, their riding's advocate at Queen's Park, not the leader's voice in the riding.
And I think that kind of speaks to my next question, is that I think some of that is leading to the low voter turnout we're seeing. I think people they're kind of exhausted by it. They do feel like power is very centralized. I worry this election we're going to break the record even for voter turnout. It's the middle of winter.
Yeah.
It's a snap election. Not sure how many people are engaged. It's a bigger picture question, Mike, but how much does that worry you that fewer and fewer Ontarians are actually voting for the people that represent them?
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned about this. I mean, if you think about it, given voter turnout and the breakdown of the vote in the last election, only 17.5% of people across the province voted for the Conservatives in the last provincial election, yet they have 100% of the power. And then Parliament really doesn't represent the democratic will of people. I think that's one of the reasons we need electoral reform and proportional representation. So every vote counts, so people feel like their vote counts, so they see a Parliament that reflects the democratic will of the people. And so I think we need to have a serious conversation when you look at the threats to democracy up south of the border, you could argue, and around the world, of what are the steps we need to strengthen democracy in Ontario and across Canada, because it's precious, and if we don't defend it, we could lose it.
Mike, a couple of years ago, you thought about changing parties and running for the Liberal leadership. How close did you come to that, and ultimately what made you decide not to make that move?
Yeah, I was just honored that a number of Liberals who I respect said, hey, why don't you consider running for us? And I took the time to consult Green Party members. I mean, you see this in this election. You saw in the last election, a lot of people saying the three opposition parties should cooperate more. And so I asked folks, what do you think? And the feedback I received was, Mike, we need your voice as a Green at Queen's Park. There's so many things you bring to the table the other parties don't. We want you to continue working with the other opposition parties and talking about how we can work across party lines, but we need your voice as the Green leader. And so, I listened to that and decided that that was the most effective way I could serve the people of Ontario. My brand of leadership is really put people before self, or, I'm a Rotarian, service above self. And I really try to bring that to politics. And I think that's reflected in the decision that I made.
Mike, do you ever sit back and think, like Scott mentioned earlier, 15 years you've been the leader of the party, do you sit back and think how much longer you want to stay in politics, or is this a lifetime mission until it's all over?
Right now I'm just focused on February 27th. And, I'll think about the future beyond February 27th after Election Day, but I'm just proud to what the Ontario Greens have accomplished. When I became leader and I said I'm going to bring my experience as an entrepreneur and a small business owner to try to build this party, and people said, no, there's no way you're going to elect Greens in Ontario. In the other provinces like BC, New Brunswick, and PEI, the Greens are the third party. And people said to me, we already have three parties in Ontario. And so when I got elected, people said, you're a one-hit wonder. It's not going to happen again. And when I got reelected, like, okay, well, you're just one guy. And then when Ashland Clancy got elected, people were starting to say, these Greens are starting to elect people, and the vision they have, the values, the way they approach politics is resonating with people, and we're going to just continue to grow this movement.
All right, Mike, before we let you go, any closing comments, anything that we didn't touch on that you want to mention?
Yeah, I would just say, if you want a new way of doing politics, and if you want a local champion who's going to be your advocate at Queen's Park, not the leader's voice in your riding, and especially if you want to solve this housing crisis, vote Green on February 27th.
All right, good stuff. And I'm glad you didn't make the switch, Mike, because it would be so much harder to find a hotel room with a red wall. Now, and for those who didn't see it when you were on last time, you were in a hotel room with a green wall. So
that's right. And I didn't even plan that. That was a complete coincidence.
Leader of the Ontario Green Party, Mike Schreiner. Good to see you as always, Mike, and good luck next week.
Hey, I appreciate that, Scott, Michael.
Our thanks to Ontario Green Party leader Mike Schreiner for joining us on this special episode of Trillium Talk, powered by the Inside the Village podcast. For complete Ontario election coverage, be sure to check out the Village media outlet in your city. Become a Trillium insider today at thetrillium.ca and watch Trillium Talk every weekday right here from the campaign trail with our team of reporters at the Trillium. For all of us at Village Media, thanks for watching.